Before we get started, The Wind is an independent podcast made entirely with listener support. Visit patreon.com/thewind to set up a monthly donation or sign up for free. Paid subscribers get access to an extra podcast feed, patches, and more, depending on tier, and even patrons who sign up for free get email updates on the show. That's patreon.com/thewind. One more thing. In addition to this show, I make a 2-minute radio segment called Postcards from the Wind. It airs on about 12 stations across the U.S. If you work in public radio or have a favorite local station, reach out. I'd love to get postcards on more airwaves. Phil, F-I-L, at thewind.org. On to the show. I think most mountains are sacred. Some, more than others, major and minor gods, the parts of earth heaved into the realm of the sky. Around these parts, there are 2 major gods, Mount Rose and Peavine Peak. Walter Van Tilburg Clark once wrote of them as a binary choice. Rose, the tall, beautiful figure rising from the verdant pine forests of the Sierra, graceful, a bit full of herself. Peavine, the overlooked other, an imposing desert peak, a few steps into the rain shadow. I grew up with others. Job's sister, Friel, Talak, memories of each play like apocrypha, washed out highlights on mini DV tape. But the peak these days that I summit with frequency is Slide Mountain. Slide is a peak apparently so unremarkable to bag that I've never seen somebody else walk up it before. Today, it stands around 9,700 feet, which is impressive in many places but shorter than its neighbors. The tall, confident haughty Mount Rose is just next door, 1,000 feet higher, rising from a capital W wilderness that bears her name. And the other thing is that a foot-bound summit of Slide is not much to brag about. There's a maintenance road that goes right to the top. And though there's a gate, so you do still have to walk, it's just a couple of miles on what doubles as a ski run in the winter. Hell, if you paid $109 or $775 for the season, you could just ride the chairlift from the ski resort parking lot. In short, most of the mountain isn't particularly wild. It is also where the radio comes from. The maintenance road up its back spits you at the feet of several towers, broadcasting AM, FM, TV, and all types of other waves presumably powered by electricity that they keep in these little windowless houses on the peak. The radio towers are minor gods in their own right, and so I climb to the top a couple times a year and pay tribute. Slide is a mountain named for its own downward motion. On its southeast face, there is no southeast face. Or it's now part of the mountain's shoulder and feet and watershed in the valley below because for a very long time, it's been shedding massive landslides. But today, I'm not climbing the mountain where the radio comes from. I'm walking a big circle around it. I'm Phil Corbett. You're listening to The Wind, a podcast from a desk in the mountains. This episode is called The Circumambulation of a Sacred Mountain.
The Wind. With Phil Corbett.
North. Just before sunrise, starting the circumambulation. The sky to the east is just a bright red. Alright, cutting off trail. Gonna go down the mountain. Here's a chant to start the downhill segment. Down, down, descent. Down, down, descent. To walk a circle around a mountain, to circumambulate, is an ancient ritual practice in both the East and West, and I'd venture to speculate other directions as well. Folks of many religious persuasions have ways of doing it, sometimes around or between temples, sometimes encircling specific mountains, like the Kora of Mt Kailash in Tibet. In the 1960s, poets Gary Snyder, Whalen and Allen Ginsberg began annual circumambulations of Mount Tamalpais in the San Francisco Bay Area. Snyder learned the practice from Zen Buddhists in Japan, and the three explained their walk as opening the mountain. Though there is at least one Tibetan group that calls for a counter-clockwise direction, most clearly denote the clockwise movement as an important directional distinction to avoid throwing order into chaos. So, as the sky illuminates to the east, I head clockwise, down the mountain. Just so many no trespassing signs. Something about them just irks me. I see the signs there. They say no trespassing, but on the other side, it doesn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. I have entered the fire zone. Manzanita is 100% gone. A lot of the trees are toothpicks. Some are still yellow. A few with green tops, but very few. The sun has risen and then is now behind the clouds. And a bit overcast with the ridges and fog, including Slide Mountain, which is completely shrouded, standing behind the toothpicks of trees. When the fire sparked, I was far away. It started at the bottom of the hill, a place you've heard before in the background of this show. A day's walk from my house, from my desk. But the wind was characteristically blowing downhill, from west to east. No cause for serious alarm. When I checked in the morning, though, it had moved against the wind, up Slide Mountain. The red line on the government map crept towards my spot, all my stuff. I checked over and over again as the fire continued its slow march, ticking off groves and forests I knew from walking trips into the valley, now presumably ashen. I was away, so I had my computer, A week's worth of clothes, boots, everything I needed for immediate living, but everything else was now in the path of flame. The neighborhood was evacuated. Meat rotted in the powered-down chest freezers, and we'd get occasional bursts of smoky updates from a couple of neighbors who refused the evacuation orders. On the third day, several houses had already burned up in the valley, and the line was a half a mile from my front door. Surely it would run right over, up through throat forest. Thick, dead wood and the late summer mule's ears were as dry as paper. And that is when the wind picked up. Every night, I would lay down to sleep, and I'd see something else in my house that I'd lose if it burnt. At first, just stuff, speakers, mics, furniture, tools. I'd think of how to get a new social security card. But then, it was my grandpa's jacket, my partner's letters, journals, signed books, projects, and the Wind archives. All the interviews I've ever done, and the empty hard drive I'd been meaning to load them on and store at another location. And then, of course, the desk, the pathways, the meadows, the willows around the Fountain of Youth, the arbor glyphs I knew by name, all of it. On an evening announcement, the fire behavior analyst said we could see a many-mile run that next day. They released a map that showed the woods surrounding our neighborhood going up before breakfast, and then shooting something like 7 miles to the north. Just a possibility, but still. The Weather Service then issued the most severe of fire warnings, extreme winds and bone-dry humidity. And the fire crews worked through the night, cutting lines by machine and hand, creating a gap to try and hold the fire in its boundaries. That day I flew home. I got to the airport early and grabbed a window seat on the west side, and I could see where they were holding it. And the airplane was thrown around by the violent winds. I waited in the valley, fell asleep, distracting myself with television not beamed from the top of slide. Those towers were all down, but I had seen this show before. Fire lines overrun, huge flares of ember rise and sail into dry woods far downwind. And then, in the morning, I read the news. The fire lines held through the night. And then the next morning, the same. And then the wind died down, and that was that. It was if I split off into the one alternate universe where the fire somehow stopped. Where not just my stuff, but my interviews, the aspen groves, my desk, the view from my living room all lived. Blackened woods stood just a half a mile from my house, bizarrely outlining my typical walking boundaries. But the places I knew best were all untouched. And so today, I traverse for the first time here, the land of the burnt. And then I exit into the living forest and continue. exited the realm of the burn scar, crossed Winter's Creek, climbed up the very steep hill, and I have re-entered the living woods. They're so green. Manzanita is alive. Pine needles are green. Yellow aspens at the foot of Slide. It's beautiful. East, 3.8 miles. Lowest point on route, 6,169 feet. It's just so thick here on the east side of Slide. It's Manzanita fields, and then mountain mahogany, back to Manzanita, and then in the creases there's just like the thickest willows I've ever pushed through, and there's really no turning back, so I just gotta keep going. Looks like there's some trees on the next ridge, so maybe another mile of just like moving at the slowest crawl. Okay, so I have moved about 3 feet. Just one kind of wrestling step at a time, and eventually. It seriously feels like being in a mosh pit. Okay. I have exited the eastern phase. Every single step was really tough. But after 3 ridges, in probably an hour, I made it through. And now I'm entering the southeastern section of Slide Mountain. And yeah, the clouds are still hanging over the mountain. Cleared up a couple times. Right now I'm entering the slide part of Slide Mountain. There is a big fan of giant gravel boulders that swept down this way last slide, right on the side of Ophir Creek. And it's really interesting how immediately the geology and geography just changes. Also, here on Ophir Creek, it's a pretty big creek, so starting to see aspen and actually even cottonwood somehow comes up. This is the highest I know of cottonwood in this area. Approaching the creek, the bottom of the slide. I crossed the creek, the granite slide, and found a structure. Lost a lot of elevation. Getting pretty close to the southern quadrant section, but at least it's nice to be on a path I've been on before, because at least there I'm not bushwhacking. In the book Roughing It, Mark Twain once wrote of this spot on the mountain. In the story, a rancher named Dick Hyde rides furiously to reach the East Coast attorney who's just arrived to town. Hyde tells him that there's been a landslide and that his neighbor's ranch, which is normally above his on the side of the mountain, has in fact slid downhill. And his house, barn, fences, everything have landed squarely on top of his own. The owner of that plot, Tom Morgan, has decided he likes this spot better. And he's posited that it's his house, his fences, his dirt, so the land belongs to him, despite being located on top of Hyde's property. The East Coast attorney, having just arrived in town, calms Hyde down, saying, "This will be a cut and dry case. No reason to worry." So days later, they go to trial with Nevada Governor Roop, overseeing the proceedings, and the testimony is heated. They hear from dozens of witnesses, and when the case rests, Roop begins his deliberation.
"Gentlemen,"
he says,
"I feel the great responsibility that rests upon me this day. This is no ordinary case. On the contrary, it is plain that it is the most solemn and awful that ever man was called upon to decide. I have listened attentively to the evidence and have perceived that the weight of it, the overwhelming weight of it, is in favor of the plaintiff Hyde. I have listened also to the remarks of counsel with high interest, and especially will I commend the masterly and irrefutable logic of the distinguished gentleman who represents the plaintiff. But it ill becomes us, worms as we are, to meddle with the decrees of heaven. It is plain to me that heaven in inscrutable wisdom has seen fit to move this defendant's ranch for a purpose. We are but creatures, and we must submit. If heaven has chosen to favor the defendant Morgan in this marked and wonderful manner, and if heaven, dissatisfied with the position of the Morgan ranch upon the mountainside, has chosen to remove it to a position more eligible and more advantageous for its owner, it ill becomes us to question the legality of the act or inquire into the reasons that prompted it. I warn you that this thing which has happened is a thing with which the sacrilegious hands and brains and tongues of men must not meddle. Gentlemen, it is the verdict of this court that the plaintiff, Richard Hyde, has been deprived of his ranch by the visitation of God, and from this decision there is no appeal."
Sometime later, after the attorney indignantly storms from the courtroom, Governor Roop approaches him with a realization. Hyde, he says, still owned the title to the ground below the Morgan Ranch. So he had full right to dig it out from under there, and about 2 months later, the attorney's realization that he had been the target of a grand joke bore itself, Twain wrote, through the solid adamant of his understanding. Who owns the land that's landed on another's land? Who owns the land that's landed on another's land? Who owns the... South, 5.5 miles. Elevation, 7,256 feet. At the southern part of the mountain, I am halfway. Though it's a circle around the mountain, the path brought me a couple thousand feet down. And here, I must regain that elevation as I head toward the west. And so, I ascend. Bear tracks in the snow, weaving with the coyote tracks. Now weaving with my footprints. It's interesting going uphill. My brain seems to click into a different gear. When I was bushwhacking, I was having to pay a lot of attention to every step, and would kind of loop on, how do I get out of this? Where do I go next? Will I get to those trees over there? That kind of thing. Trying to, I think, put into words how difficult it was to walk. Like my brain was doing all that. And now it's not having to think about each step because it's just path and uphill. And so it's just kind of thinking about, other stuff. How I'll put this together. Politics, I hate to admit. For what it's worth, Slide Mountain is just at a view now. So maybe that has to do with it. That I've right now kind of broken its orbit and I've got to re-enter here once I pass through this gateway of granite spires and then turn right to head back to Price Lakes. Pipe sticking out of ground. I've reached Upper Price Lake, which is a little lake right at the base of one of the main slides. Big old granite rocks exposed, white and pink. And then the lake is about half frozen over. And below the ice, a lot of algae, big grasses on the side. I had to cross a pretty long icy creek to get here. There's a section where it just, basically the road is like maybe 1.5 feet deep with water, and I had to take my shoes and jeans off and just walk up it. It's very, very, very cold, but made it to the other side. My plan is to take a full lunch break here and then keep going. I wonder if fish can smell. Mark Twain was drawn to Nevada by the mining boom in Virginia City, next range over. That boom is what brought huge waves of European Americans to this part of the world. And as David Besley details in the book Crow's Range, they turned this landscape into something almost unrecognizable from its previous state. This place in particular was entirely deforested. The logs sent by Flume across the valley to build the wooden underground structures that held up all the mines. The Washoe have lived here for millennia and had a very different way of living with this land. They call this mountain Da Matlashing Dalaak. The new ways of interacting with the world that were supplanted here by settlers were just as unrecognizable as the range without its old-growth forests, like a deforestation of an entire worldview. I'm passing the stump of a giant tree on the southwest face of Slide. A mark of industry and the fact that, loggers have been coming up here for 150 plus years. So I've entered the Tahoe Meadows trail system. The first time today that I've seen human footprints. And there are a few sets of them here in the snow. So kind of entering the more populated part of the trail. And I am now walking by the side of the highway. This is where I cross. On the southwest corner of the walk, the climb slows and I hit the state highway. Eventually, the mining boom did end, but the other industry wrapped around this place was tourism. Lake Tahoe, right down the hill, was carting in tourists since the late 1800s. Then narrowly failed to become a national park alongside Yosemite. By the 1930s, downhill skiing became the new industry of note.
One of the first things you'll notice is its base elevation, 8,260 feet above sea level. With lifts that climb smoothly to nearly 10,000 feet, Mount Rose is one of the highest ski resorts in the West.
This rugged terrain that had been logged and picked over was reborn as a constellation of ski resorts. There was a dirt road that ran upslide, but it was a summertime-only route. And so in the 1950s, they carved out a highway to get to the ski resorts from both directions. When they built it, they called it the Road to the Sky, and it became a hotspot for celebrities, being halfway between Reno and Lake Tahoe. Resorts like Slide Mountain, Mount Rose, Tannenbaum, and Sky Tavern.
If moguls turn you on, you should really light up on this slope.
Down the road, there were a few restaurants on the mountain. Bars, inns, a casino, all gone now. Mostly in ruins with no trespassing signs hanging at tilt from temporary chain link fencing. One was called the Christmas Tree, and they made steaks over mountain mahogany fires, and they got in trouble for cheating in cards. Then again for using weighted dice. Later, the owner kept a couple of lions in a cage out back. In 1951, Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner, who were having an affair, got into a fight after dinner at the Christmas Tree. Gardner got drunk and told him she slept with a bullfighter in Spain, and being blitzed himself, Sinatra called her a whore, and Gardner got in her car and drove all the way home to Los Angeles. When she got there, she received a call that Sinatra had attempted suicide that night by swallowing a bottle of pills. A lot of the stories about this place have a sort of cloud over them. My friend compared it to how Sedona, Arizona is apparently some sort of nexus of positive universal energy, but inverted. Deaths, fights, failed ventures, lives, big ideas all shucked off into the valley below. West, 8.3 miles, highest point on route, 8,906 feet elevation. Now I am on what I believe is a decommissioned ski run. A lot of icy granite boulders, very steep, tricky descent. But I've seen this before, and I'm pretty sure it drops onto a little dirt road, and then that dirt road goes to the highway where I can cross and get on a trail I'm very familiar with. So I believe I'm trespassing on public land right now. I think this is ski resort land, And I'm pretty sure, even though they don't own it, even though it's Forest Service, they lease it, so you can't go on it. At least, that's what their no trespassing signs say. You can see Mount Rose now. Really is majestic. Slide is behind me. I really can't see anything. I'm just on it. And heading downhill. No more climbing the rest of the way. Or nothing substantial, anyway. One night, late fall, I was walking down a dirt road not far from here. The snow had just begun to fall, and the moon was big. I saw a figure standing in the middle of the dirt road that skirts the ski resort. In the moonlight, I surprised him, but he offered a drink, so I followed him down the steep tunnel stairs into his house. He told me the ski bum history of the neighborhood, swapping mental coordinates of wrecked cars and broken mills and secret paths to burnt down ski shacks. He asked if I had ever seen that rotted plywood up on the pine tree on top of his road, and I said, yeah, I always wondered what that was, and he said this. Long ago, his next-door neighbor was an old guy, single, and he had a weekly appointment with the same woman down at the brothel, next county over. After a while of weekly visits, they got to talking, and he told her, why don't we cut out the middleman? Strictly against the rules of the Mustang Ranch, of course, but she agreed, and then they got caught in the parking lot. She was fired on the spot and lost her job and housing in one fell swoop. The old guy felt bad about the whole thing, so he offered her a place to live in his house on the mountain. She moved up, and then they got married, and then, according to my host pouring a second peppermint schnapps, shortly after the paperwork was signed, the old guy fell down the stairs and died. She got the house, and whatever payments came with it. So she found some 2x4s, some plywood, and trekked it all up the road and built a treehouse in which to conduct business. This was apparently a popular stop for the ski patrollers. She later went to jail for too many DUIs, my neighbor said, and her treehouse of ill repute fell into disrepair. Occupation, occupation, occupation. It's afternoon now. I am entering the northwest quadrant of the circumambulation. Yeah, I crossed the highway. Actually found an old sign from the old highway down in the woods. As I turn the corner into the northern part of the circumambulation, I cannot see Slide. It's behind a ridge from here. I'm passing through these beautiful aspen groves. They've all dropped their leaves. Yellow leaves in the wind, 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 yellow leaves. I'm just hitting the residential street, dirt road. I know the tax assessor's number for the house where the guy invited me in, and for all the lots around it. I keep looking at the map, plus maps of other neighborhoods nearby, wondering if one day I'll be able to buy a plot of land. The future is not clear on that. The big ski resort just bought another building nearby. They've been expanding, still the current industry in favor on the mountain. They bulldoze huge tracts of trees, use massive whirring engines to make snow in the winter, then flatten it all out, charge people to slide around on it. Seems like a profitable venture, as they've proposed building a ski bridge over the highway, eating up another aspen grove. I then look at valleys on the tax site further from the pavement, far from the coming lights and lifts, and I write down the addresses of the people and the companies who own them. On an episode of this program, long ago, I remember writing something like, I don't care to own it, I just want to live there. It seems like most everything anyone builds on this mountain eventually slides. The old resorts in ruins, the rigged casino steakhouse, the treetop wintertime house of prostitution, the golf course and gated community that thankfully fell apart in the 70s. And I think that's the thing I keep returning to. It all slides off. It's like the land itself is at odds with owning it. Robert McFarlane wrote about walking terrain as a way to map out ideas. And this whole thing, where to live, owning land, the current occupation and economic uses of this place, what it means to be here, it's all a path of thought that I have in a big circle. And then I approach the place where I started. North, 13 miles. Elevation, 7,547 feet. All right, you can see the top of the slide. I'm back where I started, and I have closed the loop. Complete. I touched my toe to the place on the pavement where I started, and I closed the loop on my circumambulation, returned home before dark. November 5th, 2024. The sun slipped behind Rose and a fever began to take hold in the back of my throat. I slept early and awoke at midnight to the news, to a burning throb in my head and chest, air collapsing from my body, COVID-19, several days in a fever dream. When I moved up the hill almost 5 years previous, it was like things all came together. I could hear clear for the first time. I built the desk, started the wind, rented a room from a couple whose wedding I'd attend in the ski resort parking lot. When the fever broke, they divorced. A long text from my roommate who'd stay for a bit, at least winter, but planned to sell the place and move out east, back to where he came from. It was like I'd closed a bigger loop than I could have thought. I opened the mountain, but this mountain is one of chaos, not order. The snow began to fall on the broken skylights, and floating up through their cracks, just above the ridge, slide washed into view. The radio towers, the crown of industry, tall in the coming storm, the lights dimmed, and the night fell from above, trailing the icy flakes, slipping forever downhill toward the valley below. The circumambulation of a sacred mountain. The Wind is produced by me, Phil Corbett. This is an independent podcast made possible by listener support. If you'd like to join the community, visit patreon.com/thewind. The music in this episode was a couple of tracks from Hannah Lee's new album called Textures. Highly recommended. I will post links on the website. Emily Pratt, who makes music as Howells Road, friend of the show Iklept Insan, and a few tracks from the public domain through Free Music Archive. Thank you to Michael P. Branch, who read the Mark Twain passage, Mark Maynard, Eleanor Quall, and all of the folks who have helped support the show this year. There are way too many to list, but I appreciate it deeply. You can find the show for now on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and always at thewind.org. Thank you for being here, and keep listening.